Hello students, welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video lecture, we are going to continue answering questions from Airfield chapter in Aircraft Performance Keith Williams book. In this lecture, we are going to answer questions from 21 to 30. So let's start. Most of these questions are theoretical ones and definition based. Okay. So a damped runway. What is a damped runway? A runway where more than 33% is covered at least 1.5 millimeter depth of water slush snow to an equivalent depth of 1.5 millimeter. More than 25% is covered with 1.5 millimeter water snow slush. More than 20% is covered with more than 2 millimeter standing water. The surface isn't dry but has insufficient moisture to make its surface appear shiny. So, a damp runway is one on which the surface is not dry. So definitely it's not dry, but when the moisture on it does not give a shiny appearance. Okay, so that is the definition of a damp runway. So delta will be the right answer. Question 22. A damp runway doesn't affect takeoff performance calculations, doesn't affect takeoff performance calculations except on grass runway, doesn't affect takeoff performance calculations except when contaminated, always affects takeoff performance calculations. So a damp runway other than damp grass runway may be considered to be dry. So it may be considered to be dry. A damp runway doesn't affect performance except when it's a damp grass runway. Okay, so the correct answer here is does not affect takeoff performance except when you're taking off from a grass runway, from a damp grass runway. Okay, next. What is a dry runway? A dry runway includes those with grooves or a porous surface that retains effectively dry braking action when moisture is present. Bravo includes those that are not contaminated, includes those with less than 3 millimeter water or equivalent depth of snow or slush, never includes grass surfaces. So, dry runway is one which is neither wet nor contaminated. Very important first point, neither wet nor contaminated. Includes paved surfaces which have been prepared with grooves or porous surface such that effectively dry braking action effectiveness is retained when moisture is present. So option A will be the right answer. A dry runway is a runway which is neither wet nor contaminated. Second criterion, it includes grooves or porous surface which enhances the braking effectiveness of braking action when moisture is present. Okay, so your aircraft doesn't, so that your aircraft may not slip or skid. 24. A wet runway, one covered with less than 15 millimeter water, one covered with less than 3 millimeter water, one covered with less than 3 millimeter water, equivalent depth of contaminant or with sufficient to cause the surface to appear reflective, one covered with more than 1.5 millimeter but less than 3 millimeter water. So the correct answer is option Charlie. A wet runway is one on which the surface is covered with water or equivalent less than 3 millimeter deep or when there is insufficient moisture to make it appear reflective. So Charlie. One covered with more than 15 millimeter water, one covered with less than 3 millimeter water, one covered with more than 3 millimeter for 50% of the runway, one covered with more than 3 millimeter over more than 50%. So the correct answer here is one covered with more than 3 millimeter over more than 50% of its surface. Okay, so of its surface. So option Charlie will be the right answer. It should be flooded with water. So delta. Depth of snow and slush are measured. So snow or slush be measured at intervals of 300 meter, every 300 meter along the runway, 5 and 10 meters either side of the center line of the runway. Okay, so correct answer is option alpha. Every 3 meter between 5 meter and 10 meter from the center line. Maximum allowable runway slope in Europe is, so for European runways it is plus or minus 2%. This is reduced to 1% in the United Kingdom. So for in Europe it is plus or minus 2%. Next, runway alignment reduction. What is runway alignment procedure? So runway alignment reduction. So you can see when big aircraft taxi from the taxiway onto the runway to get to align themselves with the center line of the runway, they take up much of the portion of the runway in aligning themselves, in aligning the aircraft with the center line. So if that portion is, so as a result, that much portion of the runway gets lost and is not available for takeoff run. So that is called runway alignment reduction. The reduction in runway length lost, or the reduction in runway length owing to aligning your aircraft with the runway. So it mainly happens with large aircraft like this, okay, which need more space to turn them around and align. So runway alignment reduction is errors in compass caused by reinforcing strips in concrete runways, errors made in the alignment of runways due to construction inaccuracies, the distance required by certain large aircraft types to line up for takeoff, the distance required by certain large aircraft types to taxi off the runway after landing. So the correct answer is option Charlie. Published distances available be reduced by the amount taken by aircraft to line up with the runway for takeoff. This is termed runway alignment reduction. So runway distances, published distances will take into consideration this runway alignment reduction, and the published distances will be lesser than the normal ones. A clearway must be capable of supporting the weight of aircraft using it wrong. A stopway must be capable of supporting the weight of aircraft using it, because it is the function or job of the stopway to decelerate aircraft which has aborted its takeoff and stop that aircraft in one place. Clearway, most of the clearway is in the atmosphere, so clearway cannot hold the weight of aircraft. Must be clear of obstructions above a slope of 1.25 percentage from the end of the takeoff run available, from the end of the runway. Must be free of obstructions above a slope of 1.25 percentage from the end of takeoff distance available. Must be longer than the stopway. So delta is wrong. Sometimes clearway can be equal to stopway. It can be smaller than stopway also. So you can see here clearway is an area prepared for an aeroplane so that it may make a part of its initial climb to a specific height, and that clearway is inclined at an angle and the slope is 1.25 percentage, and that begins from the end of the takeoff run available, not at the end of takeoff distance but at the end of takeoff run available. So correct answer is must be clear of obstructions above a slope of 1.25 percentage from the end of the runway, departure end. Which of the following equations is true? Takeoff distance available is equal to accelerate emergency distance available is equal to takeoff run available plus clear way. That is wrong. Takeoff distance available equals to takeoff run plus clear way. But accelerate stop distance is not equal to takeoff run plus clear way. It is equal to takeoff run plus stop way. So option alpha is wrong. Takeoff distance available equals to emergency distance available equals to takeoff run plus clear way, again wrong. Takeoff run available is equal to emergency distance available. Emergency distance available is nothing but accelerate stop distance available equals to takeoff distance available plus stop way, wrong. Takeoff distance will be more than takeoff run. Okay. Accelerate stop distance, which also means emergency distance available, is equal to takeoff run plus stop way. Yes. So delta is the right. So this concludes our lecture. I hope you have understood all the 10 questions that I have done in this video lecture. I wish you best of luck. Practice these 10 questions again. Write down all the definitions 5 times and revise them every week. That is every day of a week, three times a day, morning, afternoon, evening. If you do that, you revise that, you will automatically remember all these definitions or at least the keywords of these definitions. So in my next video lecture, I will solve the next remaining questions. So don't miss that. Share this channel with your friends. Subscribe if you haven't yet. And hit the like button if you have liked this video lecture. Thank you.